Cause you're listening to Jams and Tea, you won't see the show on your TV, so we talk about things musically. Cause you're listening to Jams and Tea, you're listening to Jams and Tea.
Welcome to the Jams and Tea podcast, where we spin the jams and spill the tea. And today, on this week's Record Club episode, we are going to talk about Saoirse's recommended record this week, which is the self-titled by the Violent Femmes. Please, Saoirse, introduce your record.
The Violent Force Femmes.
What?
That is not
Force 5.
Tyler's one is
The
not a
Femme
million.
Force 5.
And one of them is just like still quite a masculine trans woman who has to overcome her character arc is to fit in with the trans femmes.
I agree.
Anyway. Violent
Does
Femmes.
Violent Femmes is trans?
The
rumor come out.
Objectively, yes.
No, but
Anyways.
seriously, this is a good album.
Yes. So
I'll let you give context.
So I want to paint a picture for you all. It is
Okay.
about a year ago now. I am in LaGuardia Airport, New York. I got up at early hours of the morning and got a taxi and then napped at the airport, and I am in security waiting to go through. I've just listened to a Spotify playlist of Beck, and I'm on my way to meet Jake and Morgan. And I played to myself this record for the first time. And whoo boy, is it a doozy. The Violent Femmes, of course, 80s punk band. This is their debut record. And the reason it is important to me is A, I just find it very compelling on its own merits, but also I am a devout fan of the genre of folk punk. And to say that with my middle-class British accent is an embarrassment. Because it is such a genre of the working class, I suppose. But
No, but that's interesting though, because this record has the feel I don't actually know much about the people who perform on this record, but this record does have a kind of snotty feel to it. That's certainly kind of not a working class feel. It has a because basically the theme of this record is sexual frustration. Basically,
yes.
it's just these songs are laden with it. And almost to the point of excess and to the point of grating, although I don't think it grates for me personally.
And also heroin.
Yeah.
But it's about sexual frustration, both from the point of indulging oneself in it and criticizing other people indulging in it. You have a song like Added Up, which is a very dark and harrowing parable of someone who is so frustrated with women that he becomes a mass shooter, which is, especially after some news stories in the last 10 years, particularly relevant and troubling. But the song never endorses that feeling. It's always very, it puts you both in the perspective of that emotion and of the genuine fear it creates. And I think, Added Up is an iconic song for a reason.
Yeah.
It's not the only iconic song on this record.
No way.
You have the penultimate song, Gone Daddy Gone.
That marimba.
Oh my God, it's literally, I put a message in the group chat about it, where it's just the Violent Femmes, quotation marks. We just want a nice, normal xylophone solo on this song. The xylophone player, Hold My Beer. The solo on that song is insane. But in a way, yes, so I kind of skipped over what I was getting at, which is this is a very influential song on the genre of folk punk, where you play punk music with acoustic instruments with a sort of folk influence. And this is almost like, aside from Add It Up, almost no political allusions, which is such an important element of that genre. I think that's quite interesting. I think what's, if anything, even more interesting is that if you want to trace this back to its influences in punk music, it's not exactly the Sex Pistols or the Clash. I would compare it more to the Ramones, where you have punk music played with an influence of almost like classic 60s pop tunes. Like songs like Please Don't Go, songs like Prove My... Like Please Don't Go could have been a hit for the Everly Brothers.
I think
again,
also you have like that kind of seeming like fresh-faced feeling also fused with a kind of darker aesthetic as well. There are definitely moments on this record where the singer, I should really have remembered his name, Gordon Gano, his vocals recall Lou Reed at certain points. I'm thinking specifically of my favorite song here by far, which is Kiss Off.
So good.
Which is a fantastic song, like probably one of my favorite songs of the 80s, and just like a song that I've heard. One of a number of songs here which like I had in my life, or like heard at some point in my childhood, and never like really known the context of it. Like Blister in the Sun, obviously the most famous song on this record, is another example where it's like if you don't know who the Violent Femmes are, if you're not even into music, you still know the song because it's just permeated the kind of alternative culture so strongly that it's
such
kind of
an
bled through
amazing, very simple bass line that I learnt by ear.
And it's a song about jacking off, it's a song about coming, and it's
let me go wild like a blister in the sun.
Yeah, exactly. And that's actually like, the more I think about that line, that's actually like really, really funny. But and so there's a song, there's like this real edge to these songs that might not, you might not expect, even though obviously Violent Femmes is kind of like a jarring band name, you still, from this overall tone of the record instrumentally, you might not expect the darkness there's actually kind of all over this record.
Although I do think Violent Femmes is an appropriate name in many ways.
Oh, totally.
Because this is very aggressive, but also like, I almost, so many points of this record, I thought of the singing voice as androgynous. And this album blends themes of gender, violence, aggression, and sexuality in fascinating ways.
I think also of the song To the Kill when you say that as well, which has this kind of like dark energy to it, like something really like violent is about to happen.
Referencing Al Capone,
and then you get like the sort of bluesy squall of Confessions, which I used to not care for, but has really grown on me over the years. It's just like not afraid to sound ugly at certain points, and I think that really the record really benefits from that, from the presence of that. And then you kind of go to like the complete polar opposite with Prove My Love straight after it. Like I love the whiplash and the kind of different emotional places that this record goes to.
No, real good points. Just want to talk a little bit more about Add It Up. I think the choice to start it a cappella is genius, because it sets up to, like, especially after Kiss It Up, Lisa and Young Blister in the Sun, which are sexually frustrated songs from the perspective of that feeling. To start Add It Up in that a cappella way makes it haunting and makes it clear that this is not a positively framed story, which is super important. And I think it is so loud and so aggressive. I almost feel angry that a song that is so explicitly hateful is so fun, but in a good way. I mean that as a compliment. Again, I've talked about Gone Daddy Gone. I think Good Feeling is a wonderful closer, a really beautiful ballad about actually finding happiness and wanting to live in that feeling. And I also think Prove My Love is a great song. I think it's got this amazing drum roll mixed with the bass at the beginning that really hooks me on. I think the hook is astounding. And again, it's reminiscent of almost like Motown songwriting. This is what I mean. Like, the Ramones always looked to Motown as a songwriting influence. which is why I compare them to the Violent Femmes, which is like we're playing pop songs with a punk setup, but these are playing it with a punk setup on acoustic guitars. And this makes also the bass such an important instrument in all of these songs. Because you're playing an acoustic guitar, which is, when you play it chord to chord, it's a tone setter more than anything else. If used well, you can use an acoustic guitar not to do that well, but just when you're playing it just chord to chord, that's what it tends to do. And then when you bring in an acoustic bass, and you can make a bass sound in the background, it's really hard to make an acoustic bass sound in the background. Then you bring in an acoustic bass, it leads every song, it is punishing, it's punchy, it's most of the melodic leading is on the bass, and it's like whenever the bass comes in on any song, it's like this is when it is next to gear,
And so like wait, is this like the first folk punk album?
No, there are precedents. For example, your Dexy's Midnight Runners, not Dexy's Midnight Runners, the Pogues,
right, but like
people before that, but this is like, the Pogues are definitely a folk punk band, and that they play folky music with a punk aesthetic, but this is the first folk punk record that really looks like
I'm just looking it up now. Basically this predates the Pogues.
Oh, well,
but it's close. Like the Pogues came around at the same time, but just a little bit later than this album.
Okay, there is a precedent. I know this isn't the first, but it is one of the first.
Because I'm just thinking, like, it feels like when I think about, and this is just based on my knowledge of like the progression of music around this time, like it feels like such a fresh-faced sound. Like there wasn't really, like there was sort of stuff that, like we've already kind of talked about, stuff that this borrows from, but nothing that uses the aesthetic tools of this record in such an aggressive way like this does.
No, absolutely. But I would say that this is, what popularized the sound more than anything else.
Sure.
I think.
Definitely.
If I could remember what the precedent was, I would tell you, but I can't. So.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would talk more about it, but I want to hear what other people think first.
Yeah, me too. Who wants to chime in? August, I'm going to pick on you. I want to hear what you have to say about this album.
You are? Oh no.
Because I know you showed us, you had lots of notes for this. So
I do. So I'm not going to front. Upon first listen, I just had the feeling this album was aggressively not my thing. I mean, I was just not digging the vocal delivery at all. I was not digging the whole aesthetic of it, and I couldn't really fault it for that, because it's kind of what it's going for. I mean, like with folkier music, like to say, oh, the singing is bad, it's like calling Bob Dylan or Conor Oberst or whatever a bad singer. It's not really that's not really fair, because it's kind of the point, so to speak. And it's just a lot of stuff where I could say, like, yeah, no shit, that's the case here. Like, me pointing that out doesn't really do anything to change that. But I kind of started to get into this record on the basis that this was a kind of baseline for a lot of what would come in the like late 90s, early 2000s-ish. I would not be confident on that era because I'm not a big folk punk guy, but so that was my kind of first impression. But then I continued to listen to it, and I kind of started getting into the lyricism. I started realizing that the vocals, while they are kind of a grower, you can get used to them fairly quickly once you've had that first listen and initial shock of like, yeah, this doesn't sound right. Once you get over that hump, then I feel you can start to more actively engage with this album on a level of what it's going for, because it's very sexually frustrated, as has been mentioned. But that's incorporated in so many interesting ways. It makes the like almost nasally vocal deliveries. It kind of almost, in a weird way, it's just two things that work together in almost this undescribable way. Maybe you get what I'm going for, but I'd also be lying if the instrumental palette didn't complement what this album was going for incredibly well. I mean, Blister in the Sun just immediately hits you. It's immediately immersive. Songs later down the line, like Come to Daddy and Feel Good, show that the group can be very proficient with more instrumentally rich compositions compared to their more stripped back compositions on the earlier half of the record. Really, what I came to understand throughout this album was that there's a lot going on here that is not immediately apparent. Like, these are very clearly talented musicians who I feel on this album play their cards precisely when they feel like it. Like how it just starts more, I already mentioned that point, of starting stripped back, getting more instrumentally rich. It's just a very interesting listen, although I'd be lying if I said I didn't think the middle was as good as the bookends. Like, I think this album starts on a fantastic couple songs, ends on a fantastic couple of songs, and the middle of it just kind of it doesn't bridge the whole album necessarily in a way that satisfied me, but overall I was it was a grower for me, but I was quite pleasantly surprised by the experience of listening to this.
Oh, I'm glad you dug it eventually.
Yeah, definitely.
I did think that there would be stuff
I won't lie, it took me a second, really.
Yeah.
But
yeah, no,
it's
totally
worth,
fair.
it's worth the second.
If anything, it's encouraging because I try to recommend folk punk albums all the time, which and I never seem to get any like anything out of that endeavor. So this is encouraging.
Okay. Yeah, I won't say I'm like head over heels for it,
Sure.
but yeah, just
Awesome.
it is a nice step to take into getting into this kind of music.
I think it's a good entry point for the genre for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think I have a fairly good idea how Jake will feel, so I want to save Jake for last on this one. And I want to pick on Morgan now, even though he's eating. He doesn't want to talk yet. He's too hungry. Okay. It's okay.
Well,
it's only the podcast that we're recording. It's fine.
Well, if Morgan is too hungry, then I'm definitely too thirsty.
That's fair. Okay, then fine. Jake, you go first.
I'm fucking eating. You can eat my dick if you have a problem with it.
Which I'll do it. Just out of curiosity, what did you think I would think of this?
Oh, I know. I thought you'd love it. Am I wrong?
Well, okay. I like the album. I think it's very good. I would be lying if I said, honestly, the person I definitely have the most in common with thus far is August, in that I think the album is bookended remarkably well, but in the middle, there were a couple songs where I think just the instrumental bareness and repetition of the songs were not to the album's benefit.
No, yeah, that's kind of how I feel.
They just sort of, like, even though it's a short album, I felt like some of the songs outstayed their welcome. Like, the great thing about this record is the very off the beaten path lyricism, the strange but very energetic and exciting chord progressions. There's of course the unforgettable way the album starts, the dun 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 dun. Everybody fucking knows that thing. Yeah, but like there's lots of like great upbeat danceable parts of this album, and it's also like it's a pretty dark record, even though it doesn't like sound explicitly dark. Which again, a lot of my favorite music just kind of does that sort of tonal dissonance thing, and that's found here, and I like that a lot. They're angsty, they're angry, but they're also catchy and folky and even kind of poppy. Blister in the Sun being a song that would be played on the radio. It's not hugely depressing. And it balances its tone well, especially with the kind of nasally vocals. And I feel like this is sort of... but like it's an album that I feel like probably ages with you. Like it gets better as you listen to it when you're older. I wouldn't know, just sort of a guess of mine. And that's like the folk punk simplicity is sort of the best thing it's got going for it, and the thing that keeps me from fully loving it is that it's just on the songs where I feel like there is a less poppy or even just more immediate sort of sonic ideas that are formed around it. It just sort of like, it feels like an album where I wouldn't mind if like a total of 5 minutes were shaved off of it and it went to being a 35-minute record to a 30-minute record. Just basically on the basis of repetition more so than anything else.
Yeah, no, I would agree entirely. That's what kills it.
Understandable. Have a nice day. No, I do think this is like, I don't think this is like a perfect album either. Like I have reservations about it. But yeah, I definitely see where you're coming from.
Well, kills it is a bit of a harsh word because I don't think it's bad.
It never dips into being like bad. There are just moments on it where I feel the level of excellence that is achieved is far less than the level of excellence that is achieved on other parts.
To me, I just think the personality
goes on
is
for a little long. Confessions in particular.
Like I said, Confessions was a grower for me. But to me, like the personality and the self-awareness is what carries this across all the songs. And actually, while we've been talking about this, I thought of a comparison in terms of a record that this very clearly influenced, but that to me is not as good as this record, and it's going to be a hot take because people love this album that I'm about to mention. And
I have a feeling.
I just think it's fine. What do you think I'm referring to?
No. Go ahead. It's not what I was thinking of.
Okay.
But
Well,
I'm
so
curious.
An album that was very clearly influenced by this, even though musically it's a bit different, but basically thematically it's very similar. It's all about sexual frustration and that kind of thing, is Weezer's Pinkerton.
Yes.
I think that is a record that lives in the shadow of this one in a big way. It's a good album. I'm not going to be that hot and say it's not. I know that a lot of people love it, but to me, it's always felt like kind of because there's a balance you have to strike with an album like that if you want it to, for it to work for me anyway. Like, because there's nothing wrong with doing an album where you kind of get really kind of creepy and just like really live inside this incredibly desperate and also totally inappropriate persona of basically like bordering on inceldom, but that's not necessarily like gonna make for a bad album, but it just gets so kind of ugly in that record, and just weird to listen to, and even though the songs and instrumentals are like quite strong, it just kind of as a whole it's just quite a thoroughly unpleasant album. Whereas this has some of those kind of unpleasant elements of the kind of darker side of that sexual frustration and the way that can manifest. But there's a lot of, as Saoirse has already kind of alluded to, there's a lot more kind of self-awareness here. And it's more playful, I think. And it finds a light side to the dark side of it. Like it's not just all darkness like Pinkerton is. It's... there's just a lot more levity here. It understands like the inherent comic absurdity of the way we kind of act about sex and talk about it and like deal with their emotions regarding it. Like it acknowledges the kind of weirdness and absurdity of all that, while at the same time kind of also living in the ugliness of it. And I think that is actually really, really it's the most endearing quality of this record is that kind of multifaceted, multi-layered, sensibility of it.
It's actually not Pinkerton this reminded me of, but actually Green Day's Dookie.
That's
in
another
many
one.
ways. That is a equally poppy punk record, just without the folk elements. It also has a song about masturbation, several songs about social alienation, and about love loss and all that.
Yeah.
I definitely got there was a lot of, when I was listening to it, I was just kind of overwhelmed by the amount of things that it reminded me of because they had taken so much from it. One of which that I'm surprised nobody's mentioned yet was a lot of early Against Me. A lot of stuff, especially their acoustic EP, definitely oh yeah. But the thing is that you have the Against Me acoustic EP, which is an album of comparable length and instrumental density. And what I think makes me gravitate towards something like that a little bit more is it does have that self-awareness that Tyler alluded to, and it does have that humor and that levity. It's just that it also doesn't really have the, I don't know, the defined substance that I feel like something like an Against Me record has. This feels like it is definitely, I guess it's the problem I do have with some Weezer records that aren't Pinkerton. I haven't actually heard Pinkerton, so I can't compare it to that. But Weezer records specifically are albums that are about the things that they're about, and they are very clear-cut. And as a result, they have a very niche appeal for me specifically. I have to be in a really specific mood to listen to stuff like that. And this sort of falls into that category of being a very niche thing with me. Again, it's probably not the record's fault. It's probably more my fault just because my taste is what it is. But this record, it feels like it has a catered sensibility, has a good sense of humor. It is what it is, and I am glad that it is that. It just, overall, what it is doing does not do a whole... Again, this is trying to give the impression that I didn't enjoy it. I did. It was a nice breath of fresh air this week that I very much enjoyed listening to. It was just something that I could feel like this is on the verge of being something that I will come back to and enjoy a lot. It just never really gets over that final hurdle of being something that I can truly appreciate and love. I can just sort of recognize what it is, what it does, the parts of it that I really like, but the parts of it that drag don't have enough going for them that make me go, yeah, I can sort of go with what this is, even though it doesn't 100% work for me. It's very simple, and it's sort of, I think you'll sort of instantaneously know if this record is for you or isn't. The first two songs will sort of just make or break it for you, and your reaction to those songs will be what this album is. But, it closes in on the verge of greatness for me. It just doesn't quite stick it, but I admire it nonetheless.
If I could just add real briefly to that, because my sole criticism for this record, I have one criticism for it, and I do love this record. I actually think it's a great album. But the one thing that kind of really holds it back from phenomenal status for me is that there are definitely parts where it feels a little bit belabored to its influences, which is kind of ironic considering how influential it is as its own kind of statement. But there are definitely moments where it channels influences like those that have already been mentioned, like the Everly Brothers, the Beatles as well, and certainly Lou Reed vocally, where it's it doesn't quite... for the most part, this does find its own identity, but there are definitely parts of the record where it kind of you really feel the influences primarily.
I would just say that what a diverse panel of influences, Lou Reed with the Everly Brothers,
for sure. That's what makes it so great, is that it does pull all those things together. It's just that there are some points, not even necessarily whole songs, sometimes just parts of songs that don't quite have as much of that kind of immediate charisma and idiosyncrasy as a song like Kiss Off, for example.
Sure.
But yeah, that's the sole criticism I have. I really dig this record. Yeah. Morgan, are you ready to...
Morgano.
Ready now?
Yeah. I don't have any hot takes for this one. Maybe only in the sense that I think it's just great instead of, the best shit ever. Yeah, this is just remarkably consistent, remarkably fun record to listen to all the way through. It blows my mind that this was like 89 when this came out.
83.
Jesus Christ almighty. Okay. I mean, who was making stuff like this then?
Well, I mean, the Pogues put their first album out in 84.
Wow.
I mean,
the only comparison I have.
so there you go. I mean, it's as Tyler said, it's stuck in a weird place of being completely indebted to its influences while breaking new ground all at the same time. And I think that's where a lot of the charm comes from as across the album as a whole. It's just, funnily enough, what it reminded me of a lot mentioned in last episode was the Replacements. I feel like if the Replacements just, stopped using electric guitars, it would sound fairly similar to.
Yeah, like especially their like snotty or early stuff like Hootenanny and stuff. You can hear a bit of that in here.
Yeah.
Even though that stuff is much more kind of openly silly and irreverent.
Yeah. Yeah, I honestly don't have much to add. As really, really enjoyable record. It's not like 100% my thing, so I have some reservations on it. Mostly just in the fact that I think some songs are just like head and shoulders better than others, even when the other songs are like similar in a lot of ways, which both adds to the consistency of the album in terms of the sonic palette and detracts from the songs themselves in the sense that there's kind of already a better version of this song earlier on the record or later on the record.
Sure.
Yeah, it's real good.
Awesome. Well, there we go.
Glad to hear it, dude.
Okay,
Right.
shall we do our favorite tracks and ratings then?
I'd love to. I think we've had a wonderful discussion about this record.
Yeah.
I agree.
Wow, a good album?
And
What
is
is
this?
that?
Well,
Jake, why don't you go first?
Let's see. My three favorite tracks are. I'm not going to be a hipster. Blister in the Sun. I'll say Gone Daddy Gone and To the Kill. And least favorite. I'll say Promise. Doesn't really 100% fuck with me the way the better moments on this album do. Not a bad song. And I give it a 7 out of 10.
Nice.
Cool stuff.
all right. So, I suppose that is me. So, my three favorite songs on this album would have to be, let's go Blister in the Sun, Prove My Love, which I didn't really get into, but it's quite good.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say Gone Daddy Gone. My least favorite is Confessions, and I would give this a 7 out of 10.
Nice.
Wish I could be a cool hipster and say that my favorite track is not, in fact, Blister in the Sun. Also, one of the best songs ever written. So it's Blister in the Sun, followed closely by Please Do Not Go and Kiss Off. Learning that part, and I think I might be having a dementia moment a little bit, but learning that line in the Nationals' Vanderlyle Crybaby Geeks is...
Oh!
It's not
In
that
fact-
song that you're thinking of. It's hard to find on Trouble Will Find Me. That references
Shit,
Kiss
you're right.
Off.
Both closing tracks. Anyway.
Yeah.
Fun full circle moment recognizing where that reference was from.
Yes.
Least favorite. Either Prove My Love or Promise. I just don't remember much of those songs doing much of anything for me. Yeah, overall, strong 8 out of 10.
Nice.
Mhm.
Right, so I'm gonna say my favorite tracks are Blister in the Sun.
What?
Crazy.
Wow.
Yeah,
Hot
probably
take.
then probably Gone Daddy Gone and Good Feeling. My least favorite track is Promise, and I'm giving it an 8, and I'm gonna add a half to be cheeky, an 8.5.
Very good. So my favorite track. My favorite tracks are obviously not going to be any wild takes here. Blister in the Sun. Can we acknowledge for a second how cool it is when that chorus comes in when he's just whispering it? Like
Yeah.
I get
Oh,
like
it's
tingles during that part.
good.
Also, Kiss Off is my favorite song on the record. As I said, can we also acknowledge how awesome the bridge is on that song? Basically,
Yeah,
everything about that
indeed.
song is just so
We may.
fucking good. And then my third favorite is Add It Up. Just so good.
Add it up. Sorry.
If I had to pick a least favorite, it would be To the Kill. And I give this album a strong 8 out of 10.
Nice. God damn, that's only 0.1 less than Visu.
Yes.
God damn.
But yeah, great
what
album.
What are we talking about next week?
Next week on Record Club Review, we're going to be talking about my recommended record, which is XTC's 19. It's from the same year as this album, actually.
Wow.
1983 double album English Settlement. One of my favorite albums, and I look forward to discussing it. So please stick around and check that out. In the meantime, if you've heard Violent Femmes self-titled, what do you think of it? Do you care for it? Do you not care for it? What are your favorite tracks? Are there any other records in this vein that you like that you want to share with us? Because at least me and Saoirse, at the very least, I'm sure be very keen to listen to anything that sounds like this. But yeah, let us know what you think and stick around for next week. Follow us on Twitter at JamsTPod, and we will see you there.
Yeah.
Neat.
So,
Rock over London.
rock over London. Rock on Chicago. Volkswagen. Think small.